I'm going to begin this video on vulnerability with a personal story. It's psychedelic story time. So I was going on a psychedelic journey with a friend trip-sitting me, my friend Tim. At a certain point in this journey, I beckoned him to come down. I had been lying on the floor and just wanted to hold him. Just wanted to feel touch, feel held. And I felt quite self-conscious at this. And I could feel I wanted to kind of let go into him. But because it's kind of felt a bit unusual, or is not the kind of thing that we do, particularly between two men, I just kind of check in with him. It's like, is it okay if I just really can I just hold on to you? Is it okay if I just really let go? He goes, yeah, of course. And I just clung onto him like a baby, and I could feel something let go within me, falling into him almost. And then after a few minutes, suddenly this really deep trauma started coming up from my system, just howls of anguish. It was strange. I couldn't really feel any pain with it. It wasn't emotional. It was just pure energy of just like howling like a baby that was just coming out of me as he was just holding me. And it felt very vulnerable. And in that exact moment, I was like, oh, this is true vulnerability. There's no manipulation. There's no control. There's no defense. There's just an openness to whatever is so. In this case, it happened to be these sort of ancient whales from wherever they came from, I don't know. And that is what inspired this video, because I saw directly what that vulnerability is and also how important it is for the healing journey. It's such an important topic. So we're going to be getting into a bit of talking about why it's so important, how it can transform us, and a few steps you can start to take to explore your own vulnerability. So vulnerability is when we reveal something that is true, but that feels very unsafe or threatening to reveal. And it can be in the first instance to ourselves, but often, we talk about vulnerability in the context of sharing it with someone else, of being seen in that truth. And this is why it's so difficult, because there's often a lot of social fear, because there are so many parts of us that we have to deny and repress, because they will be threatening to our social status and standing and our social connections, that it feels terrifying to reveal them. Or even to our self-image, right? We have images of ourselves as a good person, a friendly person. And so, maybe there are really violent aspects of ourselves or violent thoughts that we have that are very, very repressed. And it's totally threatening to admit that we have them. Or maybe we think we're not an angry person, yet there's irritation and anger within us. We tend to give you a few examples of that vulnerability. It might be saying to someone, when you talk to me that way, it makes me feel really hurt, because it feels scary to reveal to someone that they've hurt you, because that gives them a certain amount of power, and you don't know how they're going to respond. They might tell you to bugger off. They might not respond the way you want them to, but you're kind of taking a step forward. That's why that will be vulnerable. On the flip side, though, it's not just hurt. Vulnerability is often associated with sadness or these sort of softer, more tender, painful emotions. It can equally be associated with things on the other side of the spectrum, like anger or hatred. Like it could be for someone who's very disconnected from their anger, who feels very afraid of getting into conflict with someone or expressing disagreement. It could be really powerful, but vulnerable for them to say, do you know what? When you behave like that actually makes a part of me feel really irritated. I really don't like it when you do that. And that can feel very, really, really vulnerable to say, even though it's stepping into, assertiveness, right? So, vulnerability, it doesn't have to be these sort of soft, tender emotions. It can be all kinds of things. Just something that's true that feels kind of unsafe or exposing to reveal. Now, why is vulnerability a superpower? It's often thought of as this thing that's really weak. When you're being vulnerable, it shows that you're revealing your so-called weak spots, the chinks in your armor. This is a very old notion that stems from the kind of people and places in time and space where, vulnerability was very dangerous. It can be very dangerous to be vulnerable. If you go into a prison and you start sharing about how sad and hurt you are, you might not get the response. That could be a really dangerous thing to do, right? There are certain contexts where you don't want to be vulnerable. So I'm not suggesting or arguing for blanket vulnerability, but I'm suggesting that's not all it is, and that hopefully we can increasingly find places in ourselves and people in our lives with whom we can be more and more and more vulnerable, because it really can transform us when we can find the places and spaces and people to be vulnerable with. And I'll explain that in a moment. But in this sense, it's not a weakness, because it takes great strength and courage to take that step, to reveal that truth about you, because you're exposed in that moment, and it is a risk. You could get hurt, right? So by taking that risk, that is what requires the strength, and that's why it's not a sign of weakness, because it requires strength. It also has profound transformative capacities. It gives us a deeper access to the truth of ourselves, and as we'll see, we're very fragmented beings, and so it brings us more together. Instead of being very fragmented into parts of us that aren't acceptable, that we reject and deny, we're being more and more honest about all the different parts of us, which makes us feel more whole. It also makes us much more authentic, because we're being completely present and true to what is the authentic us, in warts and all. And we can go deeper and deeper as we are more and more vulnerable. We access more and more of these vulnerable parts of ourselves. We transmute and process them all, and we go deeper and deeper and deeper into our own wholeness and authenticity, which is a beautiful, very satisfying and fulfilling process. And living in with a total fear of that vulnerability, by contrast, is a very superficial, very unsatisfying way to live, because it's fundamentally based on fear and rejection of all these different parts of ourselves, right? And it's actually, we're terrified of other people in that state. Now, it's important to make a distinction between true and false vulnerability, because there are many instances where people present as being very vulnerable when in fact they're manipulating. And I'm not here to judge that particular behavior. It's just a survival adaptation that people have taken on, like any other. But it's very important to know about it. So let me give you a few examples. One might be like trauma dumping. People are just going on and on, dumping all this stuff on you about all the bad things that have happened to them recently. And it can feel like that's vulnerable in a sense, but this person is it doesn't feel like a risk. It feels like this person it's a coping mechanism for this person, right? It's that they're trying to get some attention, or trying to get some sympathy or something, or trying to just cope with the moment. It's not this kind of risky, subtle expression of what's true. What will be truer for someone who's trauma dumping is like, actually, I feel really overwhelmed at the moment, and I can't handle it. That's the unsafe but true thing that they are circumventing by just gushing out all the things that are going wrong at the minute. Oversharing is kind of similar. Or sometimes people will be sad. It feels like sadness is a vulnerable emotion. They might say, oh, I'm really sad. But you can feel in the way they say, like, there's this almost mock. This is just an example. It could be almost a mock drama or exaggeration to it. Oh, I'm just so sad. I can't believe all the things that have happened to me. And they're saying it to you in a way that they're trying to, get some help from you. They're trying to help you, make you take care of them. And it's the difference is in the manipulation. They're trying to control. They're trying to get a particular outcome by presenting, by talking and presenting emotions in a certain way. Again, the point is not to judge that. These are survival adaptations that these people have taken on for good reason. They would have grown up in a household where that was the only way to get any attention, to get their needs met, was to manipulate in this way. So it's entirely innocent in a sense, but it's not true vulnerability. Another big one is where people who tend to tell it like it is. They market themselves as being sort of quite big, brash, bold, direct. They just tell it like it is. Again, this isn't really very honest. They're not actually telling it like it is at the deepest level for them. They might say, "Oh, I think you've done a really bad job, and I think you should leave the team, at work." And I'm just telling it like it is. Whereas actually, the vulnerability beneath that would be something closer to, "I'm really afraid. I'm afraid that our team is not going to succeed, and then bad things are going to happen to me because I might lose my job, I won't have enough money, and so on. That part feels so unsafe that they have to cover it up with aggression and assertiveness, right? So that what appears to be this directness, this kind of vulnerable honesty, is in fact covering up something that's more true and that feels much more unsafe for them to reveal, right? So the difference is not necessarily in the content, it's in the intention. It's in that, is it a manipulation or not? True vulnerability has no agenda. It's just saying what's true, even though it feels risky and unsafe, or exposing. And there's no real way to tell for sure in yourself. You just have to be deeply honest. There's no 1, 2, 3 black and white, here's how you can tell. You just have to get really, really, really honest with yourself. Is this truly vulnerable or is it not? Now, people don't talk about vulnerability in society because, generally speaking, we're terrified of it. It feels really unsafe. And that's fine. There are very good reasons for that. Our society is pretty brutal in many ways, and there are many circumstances where being vulnerable is not going to do you any favors. That said, we've all been conditioned by our childhood to greater and lesser extents, but everyone to some extent, that parts of us are not welcome. Our sadness is not welcome. Maybe our anger is not welcome. Maybe our singing and jumping around isn't welcome. Our needs aren't welcome. And this teaches us that being vulnerable about certain things is going to lead to punishment and suffering. And so we get programmed to fear that vulnerability, fear expressing it, and we start to shut down and repress all of it. This is why our vulnerability can trigger other people. People don't like vulnerability in others often because it triggers their fear of vulnerability. If you're being vulnerable, it triggers them. And that's why it's generally vilified or mocked, because it's just we all find it generally very triggering. But there's a great cost to this. What is it? What's the pain of avoiding the vulnerability? It means you can't be yourself. You can't be authentic. You can't be whole. When it's quite intense, some people will just completely deny their own self. They deny their needs, they deny their emotional pains and their suffering. And so they never get the help that they need. Then they have to meet all their needs indirectly through manipulation, rather than being able to ask for it up front. It's like, I feel hurt and I need help right now. They can't do that, so they have to maybe manipulate someone by, being a little bit passive aggressive or shaming someone or asking in roundabout ways. Like, that's the trauma dumping. It's someone kind of trying to meet their needs in a roundabout way, right? An example that stands out to me is one of groups of lads, right? You see these big groups of lads who go to football every weekend together. They go to the pub. There's this constant banter and joking around. None of that is all good, but it never diverges from that. There's only ever jokes and banter, and there's never anything deeper, because they're all terrified of really being vulnerable with each other and saying, this friendship group is really meaningful to me, or I appreciate, what they appreciate about each other, that they like each other, that they love each other. These things feel terrifying, and it's expressing these vulnerabilities that brings people closer. This is the really beautiful thing about vulnerability, is that it has this capacity to bring the parts of you closer together. You become more whole, but your relationships deepen at an astonishing rate the more vulnerability you can bring. Because when you're vulnerable, that's permission for other people to be vulnerable, which is a massive relief for them. It's like, I don't have to be afraid of you. I don't have to be afraid of this anymore. And the bonding and the intimacy of that relationship, be it a partnership, a romantic partnership, or a friendship, just accelerates at an incredible pace. But in these groups of friends that are at a very surface level, they're not really friends. They don't really know each other. They don't know if they can trust each other or rely on each other. And so as soon as there's some difficulty, they can often fall apart entirely, because they don't have the capacity or they don't have that foundation in place. So we can end up just being very deeply lonely and kind of stagnating, because we aren't able to meet our emotional connectivity needs. We aren't able to express our needs and grow as a person, because it's the growth comes through sort of an archaeological dig into your, the deeper aspects of your shadow and the pains. It's always going towards those things you don't want to look at. Growth always involves going towards something that is difficult to look at in some way, even if it's only a small way. And we require a certain amount of vulnerability for that. So I've started talking about how vulnerability transforms us, and that's what I'm going to get into now. Again, it reveals these unconscious and abandoned aspects of ourself. And it's when we're in this fragmented state of rejecting all these parts of ourselves that we have so much inner conflict, because there's these unconscious parts of us vying for attention and influencing our behavior, but we don't even know they're there. Like you're trying to do some work because a part of you wants to do work, but a part of you is full of shame, and that hurts so much that you have to go to the pub instead, or you have to distract yourself watching YouTube all day, or whatever it is. These innocent coping mechanisms that and we're torn apart. I want to do work. No, I want to distract. It's because we're fragmented internally, and that has ricochets into all kinds of consequences in our life. Our relationships can be so deeply strengthened by vulnerability. You can be friends with someone for 20 years and not really get to know them, or you can be friends with someone for a day or two, and if you're both being really vulnerable to each other, you can cement a deeper bond in just a few moments. It's incredible what vulnerability can do, because it, like I said, it gives people permission to be themselves. And in this vulnerability, the hurt or those things that feel unsafe start to feel more safe, because we reveal them and then we get positive feedback. And it's like, it's a relief. I can finally express this. And then it's transformed. That hurt we've been hiding from the world starts to transmute into joy. That anger we were hiding from the world starts to transmute into strength. That shame we were hiding from the world starts to transmute into courage. So it transforms our whole being, giving us new capacities. We grow and become more and more aligned with ourselves as we go through this process. It's a fundamental facet of personal transformation and deep growth to be able to be vulnerable. And it's directly linked to, just a deep sense of satisfaction and happiness in life. So how do you practice being more vulnerable? There's no easy peasy 1, 2, 3 lemon squeezy technique, unfortunately. The core is becoming more self-honest with what you feel. There has to just be, from somewhere, grace has to provide you with the willingness to be more honest. You have to see that dishonesty is causing you suffering and pain in the long term, even as it makes things a little more comfortable in the short term. But you can see how your dishonesty around, in a relationship with your partner, there's certain things that you don't feel able to say to him or her that are causing massive problems. Something they've done that angers you, and you're hiding that anger, and it's causing so much resentment, for example. Another good way is to notice resistance, right? You can become more aware of the resistance in your experience to certain emotions, or the protector parts, those parts of you that exist to protect you from, saying or exposing these unsafe things or things that feel risky, that are protecting you from, expressing certain beliefs. But you can notice those parts and start to observe, become conscious of how they operate. And I have a video on that. Just type resistance into my channel and you'll find some videos on how to work with resistance. It's also helpful to become generally more conscious of the trickery of your mind. Your mind is constantly spinning stories and fabrications, and there's a reason for every single thing it does, every little movement, and it's always trying to get something to manipulate, or it's trying to hide something. Almost always, it's just manipulating, hiding, and it's helpful to just become more and more aware of how your mind is doing that, because it's those manipulations and the fear of revealing certain things that is getting in the way of that vulnerability. It's also helpful just to continue ask yourself, what's underneath this? You're acting a particular way. It's like, what don't I want to feel here? What's underneath this? So maybe you're getting really angry at someone in quite a direct way. But you might notice, what's actually more vulnerable, more true, is that I feel really hurt right now, and I'm just afraid of expressing that, and that's why I'm getting angry. Finally, it's helpful to find other people who can really hold space for you, who truly can be present with you, and you can be vulnerable, and they're not going to try and fix you, or they're not going to reject you or judge you. They're just going to be really open, even grateful for the fact that you're being so courageous and brave. These people do exist in the world, And I find that the more I do the work within myself, the more life presents these kinds of people and spaces to me. So it's kind of like a virtuous circle or a virtuous spiral. The more you're able to be honest with yourself, the more people will appear in your life who are able to receive that honesty. And it happens bit by bit, but it does happen. And there's nothing more healing than to express yourself, something vulnerable to someone, and to have them just say, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, and I love you. You've expressed this thing that's maybe so painful or difficult or shameful, and they just say, yeah, and I love you still, and I'm here for you. This is a wonderful and deeply healing experience. Deeply human and very beautiful. And may you have many such experiences. I do work one-on-one with people, helping them to feel their feelings, helping them to be vulnerable. If you want a hand with that, reach out through one of the links below, and I will see you later.